Those who oppose letting Gazans escape war want Gazans to keep making war. After US President Trump's comments on allowing Gazans to leave, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu asked, "The actual idea of allowing Gazans who want to leave, I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave, they can then come back. They can relocate and come back. What is wrong with that?" Israel's defense minister made the point even clearer. Countries like Spain, Ireland, Norway, and others, which have leveled false accusations and blood libels against Israel over its actions in Gaza, are legally obligated to allow any Gaza resident to enter their territory. Their hypocrisy will be exposed if they refuse to do so. Think about it. Refugees from war and other crises around the world are aided in resettling elsewhere. Only in Gaza do the rules not apply. Gazans are forced to remain in the crisis zone. Refugees from the 1948 war were kept in camps on Israel's border. We all know why. To keep the war going, to keep the breeding grounds to create tomorrow's terrorists. Instead of aiding Gazans in resettling safely, UNRWA's job has been and continues to be to keep them at war. The world must stop its hypocrisy, stop supporting UNRWA's forever refugee agenda, and stop using Gazans as pawns in a forever war to destroy Israel. Israel and the US say they'll stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons for its war on them both. The New York Times reported that Iran is preparing to race to a nuclear weapon. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu said, "Iran regularly says that their goal is not just to conquer the Jewish state, but the Middle East and go beyond that, also blackmailing the US with nuclear weapons." This is what US President Trump said. "We're not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple." Iran calls Israel the little Satan. To Iran, the US is the great Satan. Iran tried to assassinate the leaders of Israel and the US. Iran is behind the Seven Front War to destroy Israel. Iran is also behind the deaths of 1,000 US and allied troops. Iran proxies like Shia groups in Syria and Iraq and the Houthis in Yemen have attacked Israel and the US since October 7th. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said best, "We are going to continue until we achieve victory over our enemies, who are also your enemies, because these people chant death to America and death to Israel. Our victory is your victory." Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Ashley. Our first question comes from Ed on YouTube. What do we know so far about the condition of our freed hostages, and what are your thoughts on this?
So some of the hostages were kept in okay conditions. Some were kept in really bad conditions. So I cannot say one thing that will encompass every condition that every hostage was kept in. What we can say is, first and foremost, hostages being taken is not okay. Let's begin with that. I have seen people online trying to say, well, look at them. They're walking, they're breathing, they're fine. No, people are not supposed to be taken as hostage and captive in the first place. Secondly, there was limited access to food for all of them, some receiving as little as half a pita a day. Many of them came back significantly lighter in weight. Keith Siegel, for example, could barely walk on his own. 65-year-old healthy man that went into Gaza 15 months ago. We know about psychological torture, physical torture. Some were not treated. They had shrapnel in their body. They had been shot on October 7th. They were not treated properly. They are not receiving, and I'm saying are because there are still hostages in Gaza, they are not receiving the medical aid, the medical supplies that they should be receiving. There are people in Gaza right now that have Crohn's disease, that have asthma. The Red Cross has not been allowed to provide them the medicine they need. Some of them were kept in cages, locked up. Some of them were kept in the dark in the tunnels, alone for months, without speaking to a single person. And so just because we've seen them come home, walking, standing on their feet, and of course smiling when they are freed, and of course smiling and happy when they meet their families, doesn't mean that there's not many, many years of work ahead of us to help them with their trauma that they've endured in Gaza.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Instagram. Do you expect that countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE will do more to help the people of Gaza build a better future without Hamas?
That's a great question, and one that I've actually asked myself for many, many years, even from before October 7th. Why does the Arab world that supposedly cares so much about the Palestinian people, why are they not more involved in what is happening in Gaza? Why are they not creating a better future for the people of Gaza? I think now we are finally at a point in history where Gaza can really start fresh. The Arab world, in my opinion, should come in and help make sure that Hamas does not control, that any radical jihadist organization does not control the Gaza Strip, so that the people who do want to live in peace can do so, so that the money that hopefully we should see come into Gaza to help rebuild Gaza will come from sources like Saudi and the UAE, and not Qatar and Turkey, countries that want to bring destruction to the state of Israel. I hope to see funds coming in from the Arab countries that want peace with Israel, that want stability in the region, that want to be in allyship against the evils of Iran. And so, yes, I do expect that Saudi and UAE and hopefully other countries in the region will prioritize Palestinian livelihood over destroying the state of Israel.
Thank you. Our next question comes from YouTube. Do you think that President Trump's relocation plan will aid or hinder the vision that Israel has for the future of Gaza?
So I've seen a lot of talk online and a lot of jokes and a lot of memes, of course, about Trump and his plan, because this plan is certainly very different to anything we've ever seen before, especially coming out of an American administration. Now, I personally don't think it's such a crazy plan. We've seen many, many places throughout history that are war-torn, that refugees are allowed to freely pass to other places where it is safe, where they can work in the meantime, where they can thrive, where they can get an education, and then eventually go back after the place has been rehabilitated. I think that it is really ridiculous that we see the world condemning the plan when essentially all the plan wants to do is to allow the Gazans to be safe, to work, to get an education, to thrive, and then for Gaza to really be rebuilt, Hamas free, to have good infrastructure, and like Trump said, it could be the Riviera of the Middle East. You have to understand that Gaza sits on a beautiful coastline. It really could be one of the great tourist areas of the region. All that needs to happen is for Hamas not to be there anymore. There is no plan for Israel to take over Gaza, for Israel to settle Gaza with Israeli or Jewish civilians. The plan really is to just get the civilians out of danger, because we could go back into combat if Hamas is still there, to get them out of danger, to eliminate Hamas, to rebuild Gaza, and allow these Palestinians a real future.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Instagram. How should we continue to fight for the hostages who remain in Hamas captivity?
I think the best thing right now is to continue to just bring up awareness for it, because we are at a critical point where it kind of feels like this war is slowly coming to an end, and we have to make sure that nobody treats it that way until all our hostages come home. I remind you that the two goals of this war were all the hostages come home and Hamas can no longer control Gaza. It looks like we're at a very critical point where both objectives could be met, but could also fall through. And so right now we just have to continue raising awareness, whether it is online, whether it is raising our voices towards our local governments, to ensure that Israel and the United States administration can continue with their plan. All sides right now, it looks like, want to see the release of all hostages. Even Hamas, it looks like, wants to see the continued ceasefire because it's trying to regroup. And so we have to continue pushing for this deal to go all the way to the end. hopefully without the second and third phases going with hostages being released in rounds, as we've seen now. We would really prefer to see one time everybody released at once, and then we can really start talking about the day after in Gaza and how we can rebuild Gaza and provide a better future for everyone in the region.
Thank you. This is our final question. How did it feel to see your cousin Agam released after 500 days in Hamas captivity? And now that she's home, how does that affect your advocacy going forward?
So for me, for those of you who don't know, Agam, she's my cousin, and she was released last week. And it really was amazing to see her home. I was, so prepared about what I was going to say when I saw her. But when I saw her, I had no idea. It just kind of all flew out of my head. And I hugged her for an hour. And I was really happy to see her. And the whole family is so happy. We're going to be having Shabbat dinner together tomorrow. And it really is a miracle. It really, truly is a miracle. In terms of my advocacy, I think after such a meaningful year, such a year when many of us in Israel and in the diaspora have really kind of found our calling, and we know what's the real meaning and purpose that we have in our life, I think I will continue with my advocacy forward. We'll see how we'll integrate it into the things that I was doing prior to October 7th. But for me, I just feel like October 7th was a life-turning moment, and I don't think I could ever go back to what life was before. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. And of course, we'll be back on Sunday at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. East Coast time. Thank you for watching.